Well, hey, hello everyone. Today we are going to start our O-level class, and today our study content is the transport in plants. Okay, so before going into the details, let's study the basics of transport, that what is being transported and in which direction. Okay, so here we are. Okay, first let's learn that which things are being transported. Okay, so H2O is the thing that is transported, then mineral salts, okay, these are also transported, and then food substances like glucose, sucrose, and amino acids, etc. Okay, so these things are being transported from one part of the plant to another. Okay, now let's see how is water transported. Okay, for example, this is a plant, coconut plant, and this is a date tree, isn't it? So let's have a focus on this coconut plant. Sorry, it's a coconut tree. I'm really very sorry about what I was saying. Can you see it? Let me increase the brightness. I think you can see it. Okay, so look, coconut tree has got parts. This part I'm showing here is the root, the spreading root. Okay, this is the bark or the largely enhanced stem, and those parts are the leaves. Okay, so let's see. Okay, first of all, water is transported from this is the soil. Okay, so water is transported firstly from the soil to the root. Okay, let me take it as a yellow color. Okay, from the soil to the root. Sorry. Okay, then from the soil to the root, from the root to the stem, and then from the stem it goes back to it goes towards the leaves. Okay, it goes towards the leaf. So this is how the water is transported from one part of the plant to the another. And in the date tree, it's all the same. Okay, so let's look. So this is the soil. So from the soil to the root, okay, then from the root to the stem, and then from the stem it spreads all along the leaves. This is how water is transported. But you must also remember that although you can't see here the transport of water, but you have to know that water is also evaporating from the leaf to the outside of the plant. Okay, this is always happening everywhere. Okay, let me show you another plant. Okay, so this is a guava plant. Okay, so roots are being covered. So just imagine that roots are there. Okay, so from the soil the water goes to the leaf, from the leaf, sorry, the water goes to the stem, from the stem, I think I am making mistake. From the soil it goes to the roots, from the roots it goes to the stem, and from the stem it goes to the leaves, and from the leaves it is evaporated outside. Okay, this loss of water into to the outside of the to the outside of the leaf is known as transpiration. Okay, so this is the transpiration. And so, and the mineral salts are also transported in the same way. Okay, but in the factor of transporting food substances are transported in an opposite manner. Okay? How is the food substance transported? Once again, let me show you. Food substance are transported from the leaf to the stem. From the stem, it may spread along the stem, or it may also sometimes spread along the leaves. From the stem, it goes to the roots. Okay? So, the transport of food substance is what we call the translocation. Please write down the definition. The transport of food substance is known as the translocation. Okay? So, before going into further details of plant transport, I think we should know about some structure of leaves and their details. Okay? So, if I if I tear off a leaf from the mango tree, let's see, what about this leaf? Let me okay, this one is better. Okay, so I have tear off a leaf. Okay, so now let's learn from here. So this is a leaf. This is this part is what we call the leaf blade. Okay, and this long thin part over here, this long thin part over here is known as the midrib. Okay, it is the midrib. So it is the midrib, and then this spreading parts, they are the vein. Okay, and this part is the leaf stalk. Compare this structure of the leaf with just the diagram showing at the left top corner. Okay. Okay. So let's break off a midrib. Okay. Let me pause it. Okay, so here I have to tear off a midrib. Focused. Okay, so look, so these spreading parts from this side, they consist of the veins. Then this part is the midrib. Okay, so this part is the midrib, these spreading parts of the veins. So now let's go into the details of the structure of the leaf. Okay. Okay, I was just looking for a perfect angle for explanation, and I think I've got it. Okay, so let's see. Wait. Okay, here is the camera. So, if I could keep it somewhere. Okay, I'm keeping it over here. No, I'm keeping it over here. Okay. No, I'm keeping it over here. Okay. So, look. This part, the midrib, okay, and the veins. Sorry. So this part, the midrib and the veins, they consist of these parts like this one and this one. Okay, look at the brownish regions. The midrib and the vein, they produce these things. They contains these things. So what is going on is that, look at these parts, we have two kinds of tissues, one of them being the xylem and the other one is known as the phloem. Okay, okay, look like these are known, these brownish parts, I mean these large hollow parts are known as the xylem, and the smaller parts are known as the phloem. The leaf has fallen down. I think it can't take that we are studying. Okay, so here's the xylem and here these smaller parts, these are called the phloem. Okay, this thing is, these smaller parts are the phloem and these larger hollow regions are the xylem. Okay, let's go to a side. Okay, so again this no, so again these things are the xylem. Okay, and these clear parts are the phloem. Okay, okay, so how will you understand the position of xylem and phloem in a leaf? Okay, okay, so before studying that, let's go to some more details. All right, okay, look, we have a top surface of the leaf, and if you touch it, then you will find that top surface of the leaf, they are really impermeable to water. That means water cannot wet the top surface of the leaf, because the top surface of the leaf, they consist of a waxy substance which we are calling it as the cuticle. Okay, every leaf top surface has got this layer of cuticle. Okay, okay, now then this blade of the leaf, this is the top surface, this is the bottom surface. Then at the top surface we have a cuticle, but at the bottom surface we actually don't have a cuticle, but at the top surface we have a protective layer, and at the bottom surface we also have a protective layer. And okay, like this one, a protective layer of cells, and this one, this is also a protective layer of cells which we are calling it as the epidermis. Okay, so this is the upper epidermis and this is the lower epidermis. Okay, and how will you identify upper and lower epidermis? The lower epidermis would consist of certain types of cells with gaps within them, and these certain types of cells with the gap, the whole thing is called the it's called the stomata. Okay, stomata. So and only the bottom surface of the leaf, only the bottom surface of the leaf would contain the stomata, not at the top surface. Okay. Okay, and now how will we identify the xylem and the phloem? Okay, okay, I have a call, please wait. Okay, sorry, hey, I'm back. Now let's look. Okay, so the top surface of the leaf, it's so irritating, and the air, it didn't get time to flow. Okay, so the top surface of the leaf does not contain any stomata, but the bottom surface of the leaf contains a lot of stomata. Okay? And the position of xylem and phloem within the leaf is such that phloem is more nearer to the bottom surface, okay, and xylem is nearer to the top surface. It is also here as well as here. Okay, look, this is the phloem and this is close to the bottom surface, and okay, and this is the xylem and this is close to the top surface. Okay, this is close to the top surface. So, this is how you will identify the position of xylem and phloem. Okay. Now, we have got, okay, now the leaf, let the leaf get fall down, no problem. We have got, so this is the top surface, this is dirty leaf, the top surface, okay, this is the bottom surface, okay, the bottom surface. Okay. So, the leaf is green, okay, the leaf blade looks like green because all through the thickness of the leaf it has got two layers of working cells, and in working cell we call it the mesophyll cells. Okay. So, these cells are working and these cells are also working. Look, so this working part of the leaf has got a green color, isn't it? They have got green color. That means they must have there is must a presence of chloroplast. Okay, isn't it? Let's zoom it. Okay, look. So, these parts they contain the chloroplast, and these parts they also contain the chloroplast. So, all these parts they contain the chloroplast, isn't it? Okay. So, these parts they are the photosynthesizing part, they carry out photosynthesis, and these parts are called the mesophyll cells. Okay. Okay. So, close to the top surface we have the regularly arranged, or we have an organized mesophyll. Okay, and we are calling this organized mesophyll as the Palisade Mesophyll. Okay, and near to the bottom surface we also have a mesophyll, but which is not organized, rather than it is disorganized or irregularly arranged. We call it the spongy mesophyll. Okay, and look, spongy mesophyll has got a lot of air spaces like this. Okay, spongy mesophylls has got a lot of air spaces. The cells are also irregular in shape. Okay, but in the Palisade mesophyll the cells are completely cylindrical. Okay, and neither the upper epidermis or the lower epidermis they contain chlorophyll. None of the upper epidermis or the lower epidermis contains the chlorophyll. Okay. Now, are the xylem and phloem present only in the leaf? No, xylem and phloem are not present only in the leaf. Okay, let me show you. Look at over here. Okay, so this leaf it contains the midrib, okay, the veins that contains the xylem and the phloem. Phloem is near the bottom surface and xylem is near the top surface. So, from the then from the leaf, xylem and phloem are attached with the bark, okay, or the branches, and it goes all way down. It goes all way down to the root. Okay, so from each and every leaf, xylem is going from the leaf to up to the roots. Okay, and phloem is the same. Phloem are also distributed from the leaf all the way down to the roots. Okay, so xylem and phloem, they are distributed all way down. Okay, so now what is the function of xylem and phloem? Okay, the function of xylem is so simple. Let me show you. Okay. If this is a plant, okay, then xylem transport water and mineral salts from the roots to the leaves, okay, and phloem transport food substances from the leaves then to the other parts of the plant and also to the roots. Okay. So, these are the functions of xylem and phloem. Okay. So, you can also say that the transport tissues near the Palisade Mesophyll are the xylem, and near the spongy mesophyll are the phloem. You can also imagine it in that way, or just I have said before, near to the bottom surface is the phloem and near to the top surface it's the xylem. Okay, and xylem and phloem are together, we call them the vascular bundle. Vascular bundle. This is because they are vascular tissues, that means they are the transport tissues, and they are combined together in a certain space, just like a bundle. So that's why they are called the vascular bundle. Okay. Now let's see. Okay. Okay, so we had the structure of leaf. Now we will look at the structure of a stem, okay, or a bark. Okay, now let's look that here is a short stem over here. Look at it. Okay, so the distribution from veins from root to leaf. Okay, all right. So look at this structure. Okay, this is the stem, and the longitudinal section of the stem is shown. Look, in the longitudinal section you will find some vessels, okay, and which are all along spreading from the roots to the stems and then to the leaves. These are the xylem and the phloem vessels. Okay, so these are the xylem and the phloem vessels. Now let's see how they are spread, or let's look at some details of the structure. Okay. Okay, so if this is a transverse section, then okay, so the outside layer of the stem is also called the epidermis. Okay, and just below the epidermis, the layer of cells which is called the cortex. Okay, and the function of this cortex, just like look, I have said that when the phloem carries foods to the outside, okay, when the phloem carries foods from the leaf to the other parts, then especially to the roots, then before the food goes from the leaf to the roots, okay, before the food goes from the leaf to the roots, some of the parts also spread, some of the foods also spread all around. The foods are mainly the glucose and the amino acids. Okay, so this cortex, this region, the cortex also stores some like foods. Okay, The cortex also stores some foods, and epidermis is there to to form the outside layer. Okay, and so once again the phloem is near to the phloem would always be near the epidermis, near the outside. Okay, phloem is always near the outside. Like in case of leaf, what you had is like here phloem is this part and xylem was that part. Okay, and now this part, the lower epidermis, has got stomata through which exchange of gases can occur with the outside. So the lower epidermis was actually considered as the outside part. So that's why phloem is always near the outside. Again here look, phloem, this is the phloem part, and phloem is near the epidermis, that is near the outside part. Okay, and xylem is always in the inside. Okay, now between the phloem and the xylem, okay, between the phloem and the xylem we have a layer of cells. Okay, although the name is not mentioned here, but we have a layer of cells which we call the cambium. Okay, so we are calling this layer of cells as the cambium. Okay, so this is the top surface that we are watching, and this is the side view. Okay, that's not a matter, but these cells are called the cambium. Now what is the function of cambium? Now look, the xylem and the phloem, they always are busy with transporting substances. So when they are transporting various substances, sometimes their vessels or their pipes are damaged and they started to malfunction. Okay, and they are sometimes also destroyed. So the function of these cambium cells, is to produce new xylem and phloem when required. Okay, so what is the function of cambium? To produce new xylem and phloem when required. Okay, okay, now so we have learned about the structure of what do you say, the leaf. Then we have the structure of the stem. Now let's go to the structure of roots. Okay, all right. Okay, so we have something left out over here. So this is the epidermis, then this is the cortex, this is the cambium, these are the phloem, these are the cambium, these are the xylem, and the middle layer of cells which we call the pith. Okay, and the function of pith is also to store food substances from the phloem. Okay, okay, now let's go into the structure of root. Okay, so here the structure of root. Okay, so we first look at the side view of a root. Look, here is the side view of a root. Okay, and what we are actually doing is that we are cutting along this section. We are cutting the root along this section and looking on the root from the top. Okay, looking towards the root from the top. Okay, now let's see. Okay, if you look at the root from the top, that means you are looking at this section of the root. Okay, you are looking at this section of the root, the top surface, it would look like this. Okay, now look how many layers does it consist of. Okay, so we have an outer layer. Here we have, let me zoom it. Okay, so we have an outer layer of cells which we call the epidermis. Then we have the epidermis, then we have the cortex. Okay, then we have the cortex. These are the root hair cells. Then we have a lower we have an inside layer which we call the endodermis. Epi means top, endo means inside. So this is the endodermis, and inside the endodermis we have a layer of xylem and phloem, and always phloem is near to the outside. So this is the layer of one cell. This is the one vessel. This is the layer of another vessel. So this layer is close to the outside, so this must be the phloem. Okay, and this layer is close to the inside, so this layer is the xylem. Okay, and the inside, this is what we are calling it as the pith, the storage part, storage tissue. Okay, and the cortex, which is also the storage tissue. Okay, let me show you another way that I have collected from an older book. Okay, look, so should I zoom it? Okay, so here we have the root hairs, here is the epidermis, here is the cortex, then this is the endodermis. Okay, this is the pith here. Oops, it's not working, I don't know why. It hanged. Oh no, it hanged. Oh, it's working again. Okay, so this is the cortex. Okay, and this is the epidermis, this is the cortex, this is the endodermis, and this is then another layer which is like cortex but not actually cortex. This is called the pericycle. Okay, then we have phloem near to the outside, then we have xylem, then and the inside, the innermost, is called the pith. Okay, so we have pericycle in the root, but we don't have a pericycle in the stem. Okay, okay, so how to focus on the pericycle over here? Let me show you in the zoom. Okay, so this is the epidermis, EPID. This is the cortex. Okay, and this layer is the this layer is the endodermis. Okay, and this layer is the pericycle. Okay, then we have the vascular bundle. This is the phloem and this is the xylem. Phloem, this is the phloem. Okay, and phloem is more nearer to the outside. Okay, and this is called the pith. Both cortex, the pericycle, and the pith, they have got the function of storing food substances. Okay, okay, so these are the combined, so these are the structures of leaf, roots and stems. Okay, now let's look at the fact that how is water transported from the roots to the xylem, then to the leaf, and then to the outside. Okay, in short, the water travels from the roots by following this simple manner. Okay, what's going on? The simple shortcut, it's the the Rocco Z, the Rocozime. Okay, then from the root or root hair cells, then through the cortex, then to the xylem, and from the xylem to the mesophyll cells. Okay, but how is this whole thing initiated? We need to learn this. Okay, and the transport of water into the plant has got two forces. One is the root pressure, I'm writing short, please you write it full, and another is the transpiration. Okay, one is the root pressure and another is the transpiration. Okay, now first of all, what is root pressure and how does it work? Okay, so now in the roof, now not in the roof, now the root, what happens is that, let's see that, okay, where is the drawing part? Okay, so here it is. Look, so in the root, what happens is that we have gone to the details of the structure of roots. Now we are going into the roots. Okay, so let's say for example, this is a root here. Okay, this is a root here, and this is a root hair cell. Okay, and after okay, so this is the root cell of the epidermis. Okay, remember that the here. Okay, so I have the diagram over here, so I need to draw it again. Okay, now look, this is the root hair cell and this is the epidermal cell that contains the part of a root. Okay, so what happens, let me tell you. What happens firstly is that, so this is the soil region. Okay, so I think you know the meaning of the term active transport. So what happens is that the soil first, the root hair cell first takes in some ions from the soil into its cytoplasm by the process of mainly active transport. Okay, so why active transport? Again, because these root hair cells, please note it down, these root hair cells already contains a lot of ions. Okay, a lot of mineral ions like sodium, potassium and nitrate. So still the root hair cell is trying to pull in more ions from the soil. Okay, so the soil region has less number of ions, but the root hair cell region has more number of ions. So the ions are taken from a higher concentration region to, from a lower concentration region, the soil, to a higher concentration region. the root hair cell. Okay. So, what happens is that the concentration of ion inside the root hair cell goes very high. Okay. Then what happens is that since the concentration of ion and the ions make up the salt, so the concentration of salt inside the root hair cell goes very high. Okay. Let me draw it in this manner. Okay. This is the size. For example, the blue are the water. So, the soil contains water. So, the soil contains water. This is the blue. Okay. And the soil also contains some salts, the mineral ions, but already the root hair cell also contains a lot of mineral ions than the soil. Okay. So, what happens is that by using active transport, the mineral ions goes into the root hair cell to increase the concentration of ions in the root hair cell furthermore. Okay. So, as the you know that the concentration of salt is opposite as the concentration of water. Okay. If there is more water in a region, then there must be less number of salts, and if there are less water in a region, that means there are more number of salts. Okay. So, more number of salts means less number of water, means lower water potential, and less number of salts means more number of water, means higher water potential. Okay. So, as more mineral ions goes into the root hair cell, so amount of salt or ions in the root hair cell goes high, isn't it? So, the amount of salt in the root hair cell becomes high. So, the amount of water or the concentration of water or the water potential inside the root hair cell becomes low. Okay. So, now what happens is that now since the water inside the root hair, the amount of water inside the root hair cell is low and the amount of water in the soil is high. So, what happens now? Now, water starts to move in from the soil into the root hair cell. Okay. This is just the start. All right. So, now there is lot of water into the root hair cell. Okay. Now, this whole process continues until the water reaches the xylem. How? Let me show you. Okay. So, the root hair cell now contains enough amount of water and enough amount of ions. So, again the ions move from the root hair cell to the next cell, okay, the cell of the cortex, and the concentration of ions in the cortex cell again increases. Okay. So, then what happens? Then water starts. So, okay. So, since the ions are moving into the cortex cell, so the amount of ions, that means the salt in the cortex cell increase, that means the water potential in the cortex cell decrease. So, now what happens is that water starts to move from the root hair cell to the cortex cell. Okay. So, this process continues until water reaches the xylem. Okay. Now, what happens is that, okay, so this is the cortex cell. So, again the ions from the cortex cell moves into the xylem. Okay. Moves into the xylem, which causes the increase in the concentration of salt in the xylem, and so the decrease in the water potential inside the xylem vessel. So, then what happens is that since water potential in the xylem has decreased, so water now moves from the cortex cell to the xylem, and from there it moves in upward direction. Okay. So, as more water enters the xylem, water continues to move up. Okay. So, there is a force or pressure created on the xylem for which the water is moving up, and this pressure is created by transporting ions serially into the xylem vessel. Okay. So, and it all started at the root, isn't it? So, ions are traveling, let me make it red. Ions are traveling from the soil to the xylem, which decreases the water potential, and so then water follows from the roots to the xylem, okay, creating a water pressure inside the xylem for which the water is moving up. This pressure inside the xylem due to water entry from the root is known as the root pressure. Okay. Root pressure. Okay. So, root pressure is basically sufficient to transport water along the xylem vessel into very small plants, but if you talk about large plants, okay, let me show you some small and large plants. Root pressure is sufficient enough to move water through these small plants. Okay, these are really small plants, so root pressure alone is sufficient. But in these larger plants, okay, in these very large plants, the root pressure can transport water maybe only up to this height. Okay, but what about such the long height? How will water be transported along the whole of the height? Okay. Now, let me show you from here to give you an animation. It's a live animation, right? Okay. So, let me tell you. I can't right now zoom the leaves, but I will try to make you understand as far as possible. Okay. So, before going into it, we must be able to determine something. We have to understand it practically. Okay, so I think you have seen the video that what was going on. Now I will show and I will try to explain it Let me open the camera. Okay. Now look, this is a spray nozzle. Okay. This spray nozzle contains the whole of the spray nozzle, it contains water all along. Okay. So, I am first emptying it. Okay. So, this is now empty. Okay. Imagine that this pipe is a xylem vessel. Okay. So, look, I guess you can see it. Look at the level of water over here. Okay, I think you can see it. Now, water is, where is the level? Okay, here is the level. This lighter one is the water level. Okay. Okay. Can you see that the level is moving up? Yes, it is. So, it has moved up to this level. Okay. Now, from here, now from here it will move further up. Okay. Then from here I am spraying it outside. Okay. Now, as water moves out of the nozzle. Okay. As water moves out of the nozzle, what happens is that more water is drawn from the bottom of the nozzle to the top. Okay. But water is lost through the nozzle like this, and then more water is drawn from the bottle into the pipe. Okay. Now, this loss of water through the nozzle is considered to be as the transpiration, that means the loss of water as water vapor from the surface of the leaf. Okay. If this is the leaf, then this loss of water vapor is the transpiration. Okay. And due to this transpiration, more water is moving up the pipe. Okay. So, why is this happening? Because there is an internal attractive force between the water molecules, which we call the cohesion, or in chemistry we call it the hydrogen bonding. Okay. So, okay. So, due to transpiration and the internal attractive force between the water molecules, there is the okay, just wait. So, this is the long tube, this is the root, this is the leaf. So, if water is lost from the leaf, okay, then this water pulls the water molecules just behind it, and this water will pull the water molecule just behind it, and this water will pull the water molecules from the roots below it. Okay. So, this is how the water molecule is absorbed due to transpiration, which is the main factor of water absorption. Okay. Now, you might think that okay, then how did the transpiration suddenly started? Okay, the transpiration actually didn't suddenly started at all. Now, look, when the plant was very small, due to root pressure, the water already reached from the leaf to the root, okay, due to root pressure alone. But after the water has its stream from the roots to the leaf, then as the plant grew up, it started transpiration, and then the transpiration became the major factor of water absorption or water entry into the plant. Okay. So that is a transpiration. Okay, all right. Now let's move on into how is the food transported. Okay. So I think you have understood that how is the water absorbed into the plant, and now we will go on how is the food absorbed. The process of food transport into the plant is what we call the translocation. Okay. All right. But before going into translocation, that means the transport of food from the through the phloem, we must learn that water is lost from the leaf, but from which region of the leaf. Okay. So this is the structure of the leaf. This is the top part of the leaf, which contains the cuticle, a waxy layer which is impermeable to water, and at the bottom surface we have what called the stomata. All right, we have the stomata, which is simply an air space. Okay, so through the stomata, the water is lost into the outside as water vapor. Okay. Okay, then here we go. These are the Palisade Mesophyll. These are the spongy Mesophyll. Okay, then there is air spaces between the spongy Mesophyll. Okay, now we also have to learn how is the stomata opened and closed. Okay, so stomatal opening and stomata closure. Okay, since water is lost through the stomata, so if we carry on losing water, then this is going to be really bad, that the plant will become dehydrated and the plant will die. Okay, so now what we will consider that how is the stomata opened and how is the stomata closed. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so the stomata has got a very a layer of cells like this. Stomata is almost like this. Okay, let me show you. It's almost like this. Okay, so these whole region, these are two cells which are called the guard cells, and this is an empty space which we call the stomatal pore. Okay, and this is the guard cell. Guard, you know, guard, security guard. This is the guard cell. I am writing GC, the guard cell. So the guard cell and the pore together, they are called the stomata. Okay. Now let's look at the structure of guard cell and the details of stomatal closure and opening. Okay. So a guard cell has actually got two different thickness of cell wall like this. The inside part is very thick. Okay. And the outside part is quite thin like this. Okay. And okay, let me draw some outside cells. Okay, so these are the cells that surround the guard cell. Okay. Now what happens is that guard cell also contains chloroplast. Okay, guard cell also contains those green colored chloroplast. So what happens is that, let me tell you, during the day in the chloroplast, in the chloroplast during day, what happens is that photosynthesis occurs. All right, photosynthesis is occurring. So, oops, sorry. So here we have photosynthesis is occurring, and due to photosynthesis you obtain glucose. Okay, due to photosynthesis you obtain glucose. We will not go details into we will not go into a lot of details, because a lot of details is of the very higher studies. So just keep in mind that due to glucose, what happens is that glucose has got a lot of, just keep it remember in this way, that glucose has got a lot of oxygen atoms inside it, which causes a negative charge. So what happens is that from the surrounding cells, potassium ions start to go into the guard cell. Potassium ions starts to move into the guard cell from the surrounding cells. Okay, so potassium ions goes into the guard cell from the surrounding. This causes what? So potassium is an ion, isn't it? So along with potassium ion will also pull the chloride ions from the cells. Chloride ions, because of the positive negative attraction. So potassium ions are pulled by oxygen, by the glucose molecules, and chloride ions are pulled by the potassium ions. Okay, so what happens is that then inside the cells we now have a lot of potassium ions. Okay, the potassium ions that were here now traveled into the guard cell. Okay, so now what happens is that so there is now a lot of salt into the guard cell, the potassium chloride, a lot of salt into the guard cell. Okay, so the salt concentration becomes high, so water concentration becomes low. All right, so water concentration or water potential becomes low. So what happens is that now, now what happens is that water now begins to move from the surrounding cell into the guard cell. Okay, from the surrounding cell into the guard cell. Why? Because this guard cell now contains potassium chloride, that means salt. So the salt concentration in the guard cell is high, so water potential is low. So water moves from the surrounding cells into the guard cells. Okay, from the higher water potential to the lower water potential. Okay, so now what happens? This so the water that is moving in the process which we call the osmosis, the water which is moving in causes a force or a pressure on the cell wall of the guard cell. Okay, this so a cell wall on the guard cell, the water molecules creates a pressure which we called the turgor pressure. Okay, I am writing the spelling. This is the turgor pressure. Okay, due to this turgor pressure, what happens is that the cell wall begins to bend. Okay, now look, this part of the cell wall is very thick, whereas let me change the color, whereas this part of the cell wall is really very thin, and this part of the cell wall is very thick. So what happens is that so the thin part bends more than the thick part. Okay, then what happens? Okay, let me clear the area. So what happens here? Okay, if sorry okay, if one part is this and another part is like this. So, what happens is that after water enters into the GERD cell, so this thicker part bends up to this and the thinner part bends up, the thinner part bends like this. Okay. So, initially the position of the GERD cell thicker part was here, okay, but it has moved slightly inside, creating a space in this region, and that means the stomata is now opened. Okay. So, this is how stomata is opened. So, what happens during day? Due to photosynthesis, glucose is produced, okay, and glucose causes entry of potassium ions from the surrounding cells into the GERD cell, and this causes the salt concentration in the GERD cell to be increased and water potential in the GERD cell to be decreased, and therefore, water moves from the surrounding cell into the GERD cell by osmosis, and this causes a turgor pressure on the GERD cell, and the GERD cell then expands to open the pore of the stomata. Now, what happens at night? Okay, let's say at night what happens. Okay, so okay, and inside the GERD cell we have the chloroplasts. These are the chloroplasts. Okay, these are the chloroplasts. So, at night what happens is that the photosynthesis stops. Okay, the photosynthesis at the night time stops. So, there is no more glucose produced from the chloroplasts. Okay. So, then what happens is that already the GERD cell has taken a lot of potassium ions inside. Okay. So, since no more glucose is produced, so no more potassium ion will now come in. Instead, the potassium ions which were inside the GERD cell, they would now start to move out of the GERD cell. Okay, to move out of the GERD cell into the surrounding cells. Okay. So, after potassium ions, due to attraction, the chloride ions will also move into these cells. Okay. So, this will then reduce the water potential, increase the salt potential in these cells, salt potential or salt concentration in these cells, and thus decreasing the water concentration or water potential in these cells. Okay. So, then what happens is that water moves from the GERD cell into the surrounding cell by osmosis, and the GERD cell becomes loose, okay, and not tight, not turgid. The GERD cell becomes loose, which we are calling it as flaccid. So, the GERD cell becomes flaccid, and the force on the cell membranes are reduced, and so they return to their original position, and the cell wall then loosens, causing the closing of the GERD, closing of the stomatal pore. Okay, and it looks like almost like this. Let me show you. Suppose it was like this initially. okay, it was like, sorry, I don't know what have I drawn. Okay, let me draw it like this. Suppose it was like this, the stomatal pore was very much opened, okay. But later on what happens is that after water leaves the guard cells, it becomes like this. No, sorry, not small, it just becomes like this. Like this, okay, and this is now the pore which is closed, okay. So this is the opening and closing of the stomata, okay. So during day the stomata is open, so water leaves the stomata and more water is taken in from the xylem vessel, okay. Okay, so you don't need to learn a lot of details about the structure of phloem or how the transport occurs through the phloem, okay. Just remember that one thing, that xylem is a continuous pipe of so dead cells, like xylem formed in this way, like let me show you. Suppose this is a dead cell, this is another dead cell, okay. This is another dead cell, and this carries on. So what happens is that the ends fuse, the ends where the dead cells of the xylem vessels fuse, forming a long hollow cylindrical continuous tube, okay. And why the xylem is dead, let me tell you, because you know that plant cell wall is usually made up of cellulose, but in the cell wall of xylem cells another carbohydrate, an impermeable carbohydrate called the lignin, is deposited, for which the cells are unable to exchange nutrient with the outside. So the cells slowly die due to this lignin deposit, okay. Lignin deposit, the cells die, okay. So the xylem wall, vessel wall, consists of completely lignin deposits, okay. Okay. Now xylem, the lignin can be deposited in many manners, like it can be, let me show you, it can be like xylem, sorry, if this is the xylem vessel, then lignin can be deposited in spiral fashion, okay, or lignin can be deposited in a complete style into the xylem wall, okay. And there are many fashions of xylem, of lignin being deposited into the plant, xylem vessel, okay. Now let me show what about phloem, okay. So phloem has still got structures like this, okay. So phloem has got structures like this still, okay. So they have got these tube like structures still, but their end walls are not fused. Instead, the end walls are joined to form just structure like a net through which food substances can move, and these net like structures are called sieve plate, okay. And there is one more, and there is a difference between the xylem and the phloem, that xylem vessel cells are dead, okay, but in the phloem, these phloem cells are living. Okay, and these phloem cells are also called, these tubes, these tube-like cells are also called the sieve tubes. Okay, sieve tubes. Okay. Now, the one thing you have to know that this sieve tubes doesn't have any nucleus, and all other organelles which is normally present in a cell are absent over here. So, the sieve tubes would not remain alive for a long time. Okay. So, what we have to do, what is present is that beside the sieve tube cells or sieve tubes, there are some cells which we call the companion cells. Companion cells. Okay? Companion cells, which contains a nucleus and is responsible for survival of the phloem sieve tube cells. Okay? So, these are the xylem and the phloem. Now, we will focus on different conditions which will affect the rate of transpiration, and I will describe them in short. Okay? Anything that increases the rate of transpiration will also increase the rate of water uptake by the from the xylem vessel and also from the root. Any factor that causes the decrease or the cease of transpiration from the leaves will also result in the cessation or stoppage of the water movement through the xylem vessel. Okay? Let me tell you, for example, this is a leaf. Okay, and okay, imagine water molecules as blue dots. Okay, so blue dots. Okay, so for example, there are some blue dots in the outer atmosphere. Okay, now imagine some sort of air is flowing, and the air has blown out the blue dots from over here. Okay? So, the air has blown out the blue dots from here. So, what happens is that the number of blue dots in this region has decreased, isn't it? So, there is a diffusion gradient, that means here the lot of blue dots are present, and here very small amount of blue dots are present, because most of the blue dots are blown away by the air. So, what would happen is that some of the blue dots will get diffused or is lost from the leaf then into the atmosphere. That means more transpiration is occurring. So, in the presence of wind, the rate of transpiration would increase, because the air would blow the water surrounding the leaf and decreasing the water potential or concentration around the leaf. So, more water is lost from the leaf into the atmosphere. Okay? Now, what about a high temperature day? Okay? Okay, let me show you. Okay, so this is a leaf, and these are the blue dots of water. Okay, just remember that high temperature causes a warmer air can hold a lot of water vapor. That means, a warmer air is hungry for water vapor. Okay? So, if you increase the temperature, then the air surrounding it will want more water vapor. All right, they will want more water vapor, and so water will be lost from the leaf to the surface, and thus more transpiration is occurring, and therefore the rate of transpiration will increase as the temperature is increased. Okay. Okay. Now, the third factor, the humidity. Humidity means the amount of water present in the air already. Okay. So, if the air is humid, that means it already contains a lot of water vapor. Okay. So, what would happen is that no water vapor would be lost from the leaf to the surrounding atmosphere, because surrounding already contains a lot of water vapor molecules. So, they cannot take more water vapor. Okay. So, transpiration has almost stopped. Okay. So, if the transpiration has stopped, then the movement of water all along the xylem and also from the root therefore will be stopped, and water cannot take in more water for their requirement. Okay. So, if the air is humid or if the humidity increase, then the rate of transpiration would decrease. Okay. Now, light is also a great factor for transpiration. How? Just remember that a few moments ago we studied about stomatal opening and closing. I would suggest you to go back to that part and study the stomatal opening and closing. Okay. So, during the day, as the photosynthesis occurs, glucose is produced, and due to production of glucose, the gourd cell opens. That the gourd cell bends more, the gourd cell becomes turgid, and this opens the stomata, and more water can be lost. Okay. So, when light is present, or if light is present to a large extent, then stomata will be kept open, and therefore, lot of water can be lost from the stomatal pores. Okay. So, all these experiments, all these things, that the factors affecting the rate of transpiration can be observed by using a potometer experiment, and the potometer experiment we will study it later. Okay. And all of these experiments, the potometer experiment, the water leaf experiment, we will all study them later. Till then, please get to learn all of this. We will give a experimental video very soon, in which we will explain the experiments regarding all these. Okay. Since this is a theoretical video, so we are just we are just avoiding any explanation from over here. Okay, guys, so that's all for today. In the next week, we will start a new chapter, which I will tell you later. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Best of luck.